all so much for attending the first session of Farm School for Women. We're super excited to have everyone this evening. I don't have my video on right now because I don't want to bog down the system because I'll be showing some videos for everyone. But other than that, I'm going to turn the session over to Macy Fawns. She is the horticulture agent in Mason County.
Hello, everybody. Thank you all for joining us. Tonight, we have a couple of different things going on. Dr. Garrett Owen and I went to a farm in Morgan County, and it is actually an agent that owns the farm, Sarah Fannin. And we did basically a tour of the farm and went over basically some basic tips and things how to get started with mum production. So we're going to start off with a 15-minute video with the basics of how to get started. And then we're going to have Dr. Nicole Gauthier. She is going to have about a 20-minute session where you all will get your hand lenses out, you'll get your mums out, and it's going to be a time for you to do some hands-on looking for disease and identification with that. And then we'll have about another 15-minute video to kind of wrap things up, to go over the system of what you would need to start mums. And then at the end, we're going to have time for questions. Mums is something I personally believe is a great thing maybe you could get started with. We talk about how to get started with mum production, but also it's something that it does cost money to get up front, but it's not something you have to have a greenhouse for or have a lot of space. So it could be a way to potentially make money and have another revenue coming in. We want to thank you all for joining us tonight, and we'll start off with our first video.
My name is Macy Fawns. I'm a horticulture agent with the Mason County Cooperative Extension Service. Today we are at Sarah Fannin's market, and she has a great selection of mums. And Sarah Fannin is the agent here, the ag agent within the county. And we have Dr. Owen with us. He's with the University of Kentucky. He's the greenhouse specialist. So today we're going to talk to you all about mums and how to get those started. And I wanted to talk to Sarah about her market. How did you get into the mums, and why did you get into growing them, Sarah?
Well, for us here at our family operation, we started in vegetable production about 20 years ago. And so we were looking at ways to be able to complement and extend our season along with our pumpkins and fodder shocks and those types of things. So mum production was just a natural go-to. But I learned very quickly that container production is way different than growing vegetables or anything else in the soil. So had a very steep learning curve, but in terms of what fit well for our operation already, it was just a natural tie-in.
And it looks like you're along the road system here, and you have a great market. It looks like a very interesting setup. Do you sell in other places, or do you just sell here? How do you market your mums?
So for us, we have really been able to hit on a niche market in terms of we have a local festival. So folks are always wanting to decorate for that. And then we do have a good road system here, good access. So that helps with our marketing in that we are mostly on farm. But we have explored other areas too, but in terms of selling wholesale with some floral shops and even some grocery stores. And we do work with a couple of landscapers to be able to provide them with some of their needs. But a lot of different opportunities. But of course, the biggest dollar is with the direct marketing sales that we have.
So it sounds like you have a great setup here, and I know that if some people want to start selling mums in other places, marketing is probably one of the most important things. But a lot of people are not along the road system. Dr. Owen, where would people market? How do they get started with marketing mums?
Yeah, so some of the ways that you can look at marketing different types of fall garden mums is either retail, like what we see here, or wholesale. So wholesale could be anything from fundraisers to landscapers only, or at the produce auctions here in Kentucky.
So it sounds like the most important thing before you get started is probably getting that market system set up. Is that correct?
That's correct. And identifying, if you have a market before pursuing, installing fall garden mums, and then the selection of those mums based on your market. Are you looking for a more vigorous crop? What color mum are the consumers wanting to purchase in the area?
And I was really shocked to find that there are different varieties of mums. There's all kinds of different places to order, and you have to consider ordering those early. Is that correct? And to get the variety that you want. Can you tell me a little bit about variety selection and when we should get started? What the time frame is on this?
So I believe for the majority of the genetics that are out there, so there's different varieties, you can consider those that are more vigorous or more compact, and based off of that selection is going to be how you need to control their growth. And then there's different programs for fall garden mums, if it's a no pinch, or a plant growth regulator program. But a lot of the genetics now are free branching, so really a no pinch program is the easiest way to start off with, and then you can look at aspects of using plant growth regulators later on. But being grown outdoors, we use the natural environment to control the growth and the cooler nighttime temperatures later on in the production season. But when you're looking at selecting those genetics, it really goes back to your market and also planning ahead. So sometimes a lot of these distributors that you can purchase rooted liner cuttings from have a volume discount. So if you can meet their deadline to get that discount, that's great. But for fall garden mums, you typically want to start planting in June, maybe late June to July, early July.
When do you typically go in and buy those clothes? When do you place that order?
From that point of view, you want to try to order possibly in December, because you can get your discounts at that point in time, so that the greenhouses can then plan their year. So to be able to buy in volume and at a discount, you definitely need to be looking at that in December.
Some of the considerations to consider in selecting the varieties in which you want to grow based on your market is the type of flowers. There are multiple flower types that can be selected, from decorative, from doubles to daisies, and so on. So here, for an example, we have the decorative type, which is a typical mum for fall garden mums. These decorative types are available in multiple shades and colors. On the other instance, we have the daisy type mums. As you can see, it's more open, and we have the nice eye spot in the center of the fall mum. Again, to determine which would be best, either the daisy or the decorative type will determine on your market. So a typical site selection would be a nice flat area, so that your mums are growing upward, straight, not be one-sided. However, in some situations, you do have to select a sloping hillside, and that can be fine as well, as you can see here. When it comes to that site, a well-drained area is most preferable, that the plants are not sitting in pools of water after a heavy rainfall or after an irrigation event. Sometimes you can install sand underneath the ground cover to allow that irrigation water, the rainwater, to filter down, or in some instances gravel as well, which will not wash away as quickly as sand. But you really have to put the pencil to the paper, determine the economics on that, if it is for the first year worth it or not. And then in terms of other considerations for site selection, like you had mentioned, trees, is that plant growth and development is influenced by light and temperature. So in terms of development, that's more temperature related. So you want to have a nice warm location. Sometimes in bottom areas, we'll get some cool air that will settle onto the crops and will delay plant development and also flowering. And then light, sunlight, or even shade controls or influences plant growth. So if the plants are in a shaded area, they're going to have a delay in flowering as well. But if you're growing your mums, say, for example, starting in a greenhouse, The heat can accumulate and cause heat delay, which is a physiological disorder for fall garden mums, but that can also be a challenge in terms of delivering flowering mums. But also sun scald can be a physiological disorder that too high of light and temperature can cause problems and marketability of those mums.
I had a question before, and it was about mums and can they start in a greenhouse and should they grow in a greenhouse? But it sounds like that it's better to have them outdoors, overall cheaper as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, for the amount of space that you can have outdoors compared to a semi or controlled environment in a greenhouse, I would recommend going outdoors before growing inside of a greenhouse. The greenhouse provides protection. However, heat delay is too much of a problem to even consider for the first time growing in a greenhouse.
I would definitely agree with that. We tried some in the greenhouse, and it just did not have good results. Highly recommend studying outside.
So there's two different types of mum production. The first type is what we see here is containerized mums in a mum pad. And then the other type of system is in-ground, kind of very similar to a ball and burlap with trees and nursery shrubs. I've only seen this a few times. It's not as popular. Whereas a containerized production system like we see here gives you greater control over the plant growth and what you can apply to the plants. So some of the things to consider if you're wanting to start for the very first time is container selection. So this will also go back to the type of plants that are being grown in terms of vigorousness. So for most plants, you want the plant size to be 1.5 times the size of the pot height. So that's something to consider. But, sometimes bigger the better with these fall garden mums. That can be a very high selling point for you. So definitely the selection of the pot size. Typical sizes can be anywhere from a 6-inch pot to 8-inch, 9 or 10-inch mum pan. I believe these are 10-inch mum pans that we have here in the background. As I mentioned before, container selection is important for fall garden mum production. Based off your market, you need to select the container that will work best for you. If you're growing for wholesale only, such as to landscapers, you may want to consider just growing in a mum pan. These mum pans, as this one here to my left, is very similar to a nursery container and are much cheaper. If you're growing for retail only, you may want to consider a more decorative container, such as these terracotta containers or a more decorative patio pot that has a more design on it. Regardless, these two decorative containers can demand a higher price point for your market. And then when it comes to filling that container, there's two different substrates that can be used. A peat-based substrate that's typically 80-70% peat moss and then perlite. And this has a wetting agent, nutrient starter charge, and a limestone to help neutralize the acidity of the peat moss in the container. And this should help maintain that target pH of 5.8 to 6.2 throughout the production cycle without having any pH issues related to the substrate. The other type of substrate that can be considered is a bark-based, which is typically about 60% bark, pine bark, H-pine bark, 20% perlite, 20% peat moss. So I would first start off with purchasing commercially blended substrates from your local greenhouse supplier before deciding to make your own.
And Sarah, you have a great selection of mums here. They look beautiful. Do you have any trouble with insects or disease? What issues do you have with your mums or mums?
So there's several things that you need to look out for, but mums, once you establish your routine and know what to look for, they're very grower friendly, I think, and forgiving as long as they're getting their water. That's the main thing. And there's nothing better than for me to come out early in the morning and just kind of walk these lines. It's something that you want to do. It's just constantly, Steve Berberwich taught me this, is that you just want to be walking them and just looking for things that could be a little bit off. And those things could include, why is one pot wilting and the other pots are fine? Well, maybe it's because the dripper is stopped up. or we're looking for what types of critters may be flying up out of the mum. So we've got to be watching for our insects. Our biggest problem for us has been our diseases, some of those that are in the soil that can come in contact with the container, but there are really good and relatively easy disease prevention patterns that you can implement, fungicides.
When growing outdoor fall garden mums, pests can be an issue. Some of those pests can be those that are found in the greenhouse. However, with it being an open environment, other pests can inhabit our fall garden mums. So some of the most common greenhouse pests or outdoor pests that I have seen in the past couple of years in fall garden mums ranges leaf miners, aphids. I've seen cabbage loopers, caterpillars, two-spotted spider mites, and even whiteflies. That's just to name a few, and I'm sure there are other pests that can be detrimental or cause damage to your garden mums. So it is important to contact your county agriculture or horticulture agent so then they can contact the correct individuals to help mitigate or help combat some of these fall garden mum pests that you may encounter for the first year.
All right, we're going to go ahead and let Dr. Goche do the hands-on portion. If you all will go ahead and get your mums ready and then your hand lens.
All right, ready? How's my volume? Everybody okay with that? Okay, so unfortunately, I have a very strange, hold on. I have a very strange light coming through my window. So the window blinds have been making stripes. So we're a little bit dark, but I'm going to switch out into a little microscope for everyone so that you can see what I'm seeing. So anyway, apologies for that. So I've got my mom right here. I know it's dark. Okay, so I've got my mom right here. So we're going to talk through what a plant pathologist would look for. So again, I am a plant pathologist. My screen, I am somehow, I don't know. Okay, I'm sorry. So I am a plant pathologist, meaning that my focus is disease. So when you call me or when your county agents call me, it's strictly because there's a disease issue or a suspect disease issue. So it's not very often that I get these nice mums like this. Instead, I usually get them when they're in really bad shape. So we are dealing with a happy mum today, but we're going to pretend. So in terms of diseases there, so you do have a handout. So we're not going to go through disease by disease. If any of you ever get into mum production, we could probably make a visit and help you through. But there are diseases, they're all primarily soil-borne diseases that affect mums. Soil-borne means that these pathogens live in the soil and spend their lives in the soil. So those are Pythium root rot, Rhizoctonia web blight, and Fusarium wilt. Those are the three big mum diseases that we deal with. They're soil-borne. Very often they're in the soil, or if not, they're introduced to the soil and they increase their numbers. So the kicker here is that once you lay a mum pad down, so you've got either the sand or the gravel, usually everybody goes as thin as they possibly can just to get everything leveled. Then they put their ground cloth and the mums go on top of that. But think about that as you water and as it rains, that water does move from that container to the actual soil level. So if we ever have an introduction of any of those three pathogens, they're living there in the soil, in that natural soil that's underneath that gravel. And so every time you water, you're introducing it up and down. And what we'll see is a lot of people are extremely successful their first year of mum production. And then every year they're seeing a little bit more disease year after year. So if you remember anything from today is that you're going to have a fungicide program. Mums require that fungicide input, period. Don't try to do it without it. Secondly, so we run it through the fertigation system or through the irrigation system. Those are drenches. And there should be in your packet, there should be some information there. So definitely look through that. We don't have time today. I could spend hours talking about mum diseases, but we're not going to do that today. So thinking about mums, so I'm going to look at this from even a consumer standpoint, or maybe if you would be buying mums for your market, or if you were the mum grower and you were choosing to inspect your own mum. So let's look at it from that point of view. So you're always going to look at the mum as a whole, right? So your wide angle view. So stand back, look at the site. Where are there any patterns of mums that don't quite look right? Is the color okay? Is the shape okay? Maybe the lower portion of a field might have more problems, or the edges, or the center, or maybe a certain cultivar, or a certain color, or a certain block, etc. Next thing we always do, we always look at it, just the plant itself. So we're going to look at the plant more closely. So what's going on with this plant, if this plant indeed had any problems. So that's always really important. And something that a lot of people don't do, and I highly recommend doing it, and you could totally do this with any container grown plant, is you're always going to inspect the roots. So one of the major diseases is Pythium root rot. So we'll use that as our example today to kind of talk a little bit about it. So we're going to look at our mums and we're going to look at these roots. So here it is in the container. So this is what I do. So I'm one of those people, if I visit the nursery, I'm taking my plants out of the pot. I'm looking at the root system. So you're always going to take the plant out of the pot and you're going to examine the root system. And that's what we're going to do today. So if you're following along, pop your plant out of the pot so we can take a look at it. All right. And I'm going to slow down just a little bit so that you can do that. I'm going to lay this thing down. So I am very destructive. So warning on that. I'm going to adjust my view here. I'm sorry. Okay, so I am having problems with my view, everybody. I am showing, all right. Okay, all right, never mind. So I am looking at the roots on this plant. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna take that same very wide angle view, okay? Look at these roots, what do they look like? So think about what these roots look like. Is this normal? Is this good? What do mum roots look like? What do roots in general look like? So if you're a producer, you've always got to know what healthy is. You don't know what healthy is, you cannot know what abnormal is. So always know what healthy is and what healthy looks like. The mum that I received, so I received the same mum as you did, but this one is dry. So I'm going to show you what not okay looks like, and it's probably just the result of holding over. That may happen to you in your nursery. That may happen to you if you're a consumer and you have it on your porch. It may happen for a lot of reasons. It may happen because of a production problem, or it just may happen, you know, in this case, this one has been traveling for a few days and finally made it to me. So my particular mom, the roots are not white. These roots are brown and tan. They really don't look that great. Okay, so I'm not impressed with these roots. Again, I'm going to explain this one because this mum is very dry. And this would not happen in a production system. And if it does, and I knew that when I picked up the mum, but if this were a production system, you should know that. So Sarah said in her video earlier that she always walks her mums every morning. Okay, knowing that, you'll know if anything starts to get dry, you can pick up. Okay, so if everybody wants to just flip their mum out, and let's take a look at a few things. So so what we have, so I'm going to show you first this hand lens. So I've got this hand lens. Everyone should have those in their boxes. So a hand lens is basically like a jeweler's loop. Let's see if you can see that. It's a jeweler's loop, right? These in fact have a light. So you see that little, let's see, you see that little black button? That's a light. You may need that light. I personally don't like the light. It bothers my eyes. Oh, by the way, it should be facing down. Don't face it up, because then you'll really not like the light. But anyway, there's a little LED light in here. On the top side, you'll see the little circle. This is not, You'll see the little circle with the 2 dots. That is the little tool. That's where the battery is. That's where you change the battery. But anyway, that little battery compartment faces up. The little light faces down. So this is how you use a hand lens. And I'm going to show you. By the way, I don't use glasses for a hand lens. I need everybody to try it with and without and tell me what it is you like. So when you use a hand lens, the hand lens goes to your eye just like your eyeglasses would. Okay, so your hand lens doesn't happen this way. Your hand lens happens at your eye. My preference is I like to rest my knuckle on the bridge of my nose. That helps me hold it steady. We all know that the older we get, the less steady we are, right? So if you lean your hand against your face, you've created steadiness. So you're going to bring your sample to the hand lens until it comes into focus. Does everybody do that? So my knuckle is against my nose, wherever it's comfortable, there are no rules. And then my hand is coming closer, closer, closer until it comes into focus. And once it comes into focus, that is close enough. Is everybody doing that? Anybody have problems doing that? All right, so that's how to use a hand lens. Now we're going to use that same technique and we're going to look at our mum. So of course, I love to dismantle these things and bring the pieces close to me. But instead, we're going to try to save this pretty mum to put on our front porches, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to put our hand lens to our eye, and then we're bringing our face to our mum. Or you could bring the big mum to you. It'll be a little bit harder. Okay, so if everybody wants to follow along, and we're going to calm down, and we're going to look at our roots on our mum. Is everybody doing that? So what I'm going to do while you're doing that, I am going to switch and share my screen. I have a little microscope. No, that's not right. Hold on. I was going to show you what you're supposed to see. Let's try again. Let me try a different screen. Here it is. I am so sorry. Today is my clunky day. So I am trying one more time. Okay, are you seeing my Dino Light, April? Whoever?
No, ma'am.
What are you seeing?
You.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay.
Nicole, you might have to reshare your screen. There it is.
There you are.
Okay, you find it? You see my Dino Light?
Yep.
There we go. Okay, so this is what you should be seeing with your hand lens. All right, so I'm putting my hand lens here against my roots. Is everybody seeing that? So you'll see these roots are flattened, right? You'll see these roots are brown. Is that better? You'll see these roots are brown and you see they're flattened, right? A good healthy root would be round and turgid and it would be white, right? And these are brown, they're tannish, they're kind of flattened. So they're definitely a little bit deflated, if you will. All right, so that signifies a problem. Now, what is that problem? If this were in the grower nursery, I would have different concerns. Okay, we're kind of blaming this one on the transport to get it here to me. All right, so you see all this browning. So what is that problem? This is what a grower would be concerned about, and this is what a grower would examine on a regular basis, right? You'll see in each of these roots, you'll see in the center of that root, you'll see that stripe. That stripe, that is the steel of the root, right? So the outside of a root is the cortex, the inside is the steel. You should never see that white stripe. You should never see the steel. So we definitely have root damage here. Okay, does anybody have any questions here? And if you do have questions, you can unmute because I cannot at this minute see the chat box or someone, the moderators can speak. So is everybody able to see that? Are you feeling good with your hand lens? All right, you're all quiet. I'm assuming that's a yes. So, so this is something that you're always going to do. You're always going to look with your hand lens. So I'm going to unshare here. I have 3 screens in my office in case you're wondering where all the confusion comes from. I have 10 things open. So, so when you're looking at, so when you have a problem with a plant, with your mom, with any plant, you're going to tear open this root ball and you're going to examine it through and through. You're going to turn it, you're going to look at it from lots of different directions. We're not doing that today, but if you were the grower, you would do that. And if you're any kind of grower, so not just mom production, that's how you look at the health of your plants, and that's how you can determine where the problem is. So let's think about what would happen if you had a Pythium root rot, for example, or any root problem, whether it was an abiotic factor like drought or salt buildup or lack of fertility. What happens when you have a root problem? What would you see as the grower or as the buyer or as the consumer? What do you see when there's a root problem? So you're going to see everything above it suffer, right? So when you have root rots or root damage, you don't have water and nutrient uptake. And when you lose water and nutrient uptake, you suddenly have a thirsty, hungry plant. So any upper plant part issues are going to look like nutrient deficiency, drought, etc. So when you see those upper plant parts suffering, you're going to call your county agent. They may call Dr. Owen and say, there's a nutritional problem here. Can you help us through this? And what he is going to do, or ask the agent to do, or your agent will probably do this anyway, is take a look at that root system. And that's going to tell us a lot. So if you see roots that are really suffering, then you have to decide what is that problem. But anyway, so anytime you have a root problem, everything in the upper canopy is going to be nutrient deprived and water deprived. All right. So I'm going to show you something else, and I have to switch back. Let's see if I can do this. I'm sure I cannot. So when you do have an uptake issue, one of the other symptoms that you may see is we call marginal leaf scorch. And that's when the margins of leaves are brown. Marginal leaf scorch is usually an indication of water deprivation. And so I look at it from the point of like a root rot, not allowing water and nutrients to be uptaken. But it could be drought, etc. So my mom, of course it's dry, so my mom is starting to show marginal leaf scorch. So I'm going to attempt this, everyone. I have some very early symptoms of marginal leaf scorch. No, you can't see it. Okay, you can see it. I see a couple of head shaking. So those margins turning brown. And marginal leaf scorch, again, is not an indication of disease on the leaf. It's an indication that there is an uptake issue, primarily water. So go outside. It's been dry for a while. Go outside and look at leaves. You should see marginal leaf scorch in your landscape. You should see marginal leaf scorch in a lot of places. So start to think about that. If there were any crown or stem injuries, you could still have marginal leaf scorch because, again, that is an interruption of water and nutrients making their way, or primarily water making its way to that leaf. So if there's a nutritional uptake issue, it would be yellow or discoloration. But if there's that brown margin, it's usually water. Now, if you call me, or if your agent calls me, I am completely looking at it from a disease lens, right? Because that is my specialty. That's when I get that call. If you call the entomologist, they're going to ask about maybe fungus gnats or something burrowing right in the roots. If you call the horticulturist, they're going to look at other things. So you've got to really be able to look at it broadly and determine what the problem might be. So I am going to share, now this is in your packet, but I'm going to share one more thing. So are you seeing my PowerPoint screen?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So this is, I want to show you Pythium root rot. So I really looked at this, Mom. I was hoping I could find Pythium for you just for fun. But again, Sarah is a good grower, so we don't see Pythium today. But this is in your packet. And I want to just point out that this would be what I was looking for in terms of Pythium root rot. Can you see my mouse? No?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
so
yes.
You can. All right. So on the right-hand screen, you'll see this, we call this a rat's tail. That is that pointed, skinny structure. That is the steel of that root. So the steel is sticking out, and I'm sorry, right about here, you'll see that cortex is broken off. So it is sloughed off. That is very classic of Pythium root rot. So when we have Pythium, we usually have that rat's tail symptom, and you can see that. You can see that with your hand lens. It's always a really good habit. Anytime you have an herbaceous plant, whether it's bedding plants or mums or vegetables, you can always look for that sloughing off in that rat tail on that root. And that's usually an indication that there's Pythium. All right. And so on the left-hand image, this is early Pythium. You see it's brown. You'll see it's a little bit collapsed or a lot collapsed. You see there are no root hairs starting probably a centimeter or so down at that tip. So Pythium eat from the roots. They're root nibblers. And once you have that decay, you can easily have it sloughing off. And anytime you handle it, you will slough that off. So we have here, this is a healthy white root, and then you have infection on the tip, right? And whereas the center of the image, you see that brown root, that one is an advanced level of decay. You'll see that they're pretty flat. Look here, you kind of see some pinching in there, flattening. Those are all things to look at. And as we ask you to describe what symptoms you're seeing, you've got to be able to describe these things. And a hand lens, these $5 hand lenses, are absolutely worth their weight in gold. You can learn so much. And we can talk for hours about leaf diseases and stem diseases, but root diseases is one I think a lot of times we overlook. So I just wanted to show you roots today. So make it a habit now that you all have your hand lenses. You can go around and you can look at everything you have, and you will. I hope you do. And hopefully you can see rat's tails. It's not good if they're yours, but hopefully you can find rat tails and have a better idea of what may be out there. Okay, so I know that our time is really limited today. I will take any questions that anybody has.
Feel free to put those in the chat box or unmute your mic and ask them in person.
No questions.
Nicole, I have a question. I know you've helped me with something in the past, and I think that might just be interesting information for the ladies on here this evening. But can you sell a diseased plant if you knowingly know it's diseased?
You cannot sell a diseased plant. Thank you for asking that question. You cannot sell a diseased plant. It is against the law. It's against Kentucky law. So we do have nursery inspectors that come around that you may or may not see them in a season, especially with the limited mum season. But if you have a known disease plant, you cannot sell it. And to add insult to injury, I want you to know this. I told you if you remembered anything today. Remember two things today, is that fungicides do not cure disease, not just with mums, but with anything. So once you have disease, fungicides will not cure them. If it's a leaf disease, you can use fungicides, and those leaves may fall and new leaves may be healthy. And that's a little bit different than if you have a root or stem disease. Those cannot be eliminated. So once you have disease, it's too late. And that's why I really pressure everyone to have a fungicide program if you're going to grow mums. It's worth it, because if you lose 10% of your crop, and typically when these root diseases come in, you can lose 10 to 20% of your crop, it'll by far pay for itself. So protect these mums, make sure that if those pathogens are near, they cannot infect, because your fungicides will act as a force field. They will prevent infection even if the pathogen is around. So great question, April. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Gauthier, for joining us. And it was a great presentation and a hands-on experience. Thank you. Now we are going to move on to our next part, which is going to be the second part of our video.
Dr. Owen, it looks like there's a lot of considerations for a drip system. Can you tell me a little bit more about the setup and what we would need?
Sure. So some of the considerations for an irrigation system, of course, is having a fertilizer injector and also an acid injector, or you can have one for both. Once that irrigation water comes, for example, from a well or for a pond, it goes through the fertilizer injector, which we're going to look at later, goes to the header line, and then that irrigation water is delivered to these other lines that are running down the mum pad. And these irrigation lines, as you can see here, are made out of probably 1/2 inch orchard tubing. Based on the plant vigor, will help you determine how far apart that plant should be spaced. So for example, here on this ground cover, we have these purple lines. Sometimes these ground covers come with white or yellow lines, but nonetheless, we can use these lines that are spaced 1 foot apart to space our plants. As you can see here, that we have plants spaced every 4 feet. So 4 foot centers and probably 2 or 3 foot horizontal. So once you know what size plant that you're going to be growing, the size container, that way you can set up your irrigation system. So for this irrigation line that we have running down the mum pad, we have what we call buttons, and these buttons are pressure compensated. You can also buy non-pressure compensated buttons. However, the challenge with those is that when you are irrigating, not all the plants will be irrigated similarly, or the amount of volume of irrigation water delivered to those crops will be uneven. So then you'll have some challenges in terms of watering the crop and getting them all the same. So something to consider in terms of an investment is these pressure compensated emitters that we have here. So these pressure compensated emitters have the ability to have a single micro tubing. So this is considered a micro tubing, or you can have different split valves. So here, Sarah has it set up so that she can irrigate 4 pots off of 1 button emitter. From those, you have your micro tubing, and then you can have drip emitters. In this instance, we have these drip stakes that go straight into the container and delivers that nutrient solution to the plant.
Dr. Owen, it looks like we have a lot of different fertilizers that we can use. I know fertilizer is a very important part with any type of production. Can you tell me a little bit more about what type of fertilizer we should use and at what rates? How do we get started on that?
Yeah, so fertilizer selection can be quite confusing. However, for fall garden moms, it can be straightforward. So in terms of selecting a fertilizer for fall garden moms, we want to go with a 20-10-20. So that's 20% nitrogen, 10% phosphorus, and 20% potassium. So 20-10-20 NPK. So when selecting this fertilizer, it is a complete fertilizer. So that means it has all the macro and micronutrients that will be available to the plant. However, fall garden moms do require more calcium, and that's where we may have to supplement a calcium nitrate-based fertilizer. So, for example, here we have just calcite, which is 15.500, so it's only providing calcium nitrate to the plant. If this is not available, or you would rather use a calcium nitrate-based fertilizer, you can use one such as 13-2-13 or 15-5-15. So this is what you want to provide to the plants if you have a system that is providing a constant liquid feed of all this water-soluble fertilizer. So you're feeding at every irrigation event. Now, there are other types of fertility programs that can be provided to plants in terms of fall garden moms, and that is utilizing water-soluble fertilizers or the small fertilizer drills that can be top dressed on top of the substrate or blended into the substrate or the growing media. However, for the first time, I would not recommend this until you have a little bit more experience in terms of growing fall garden mums. The greatest challenge with slow release fertilizers or controlled release fertilizers is that you have no control over them when you're growing them outdoors. However, if you do have a heavy irrigation event or rainfall, you're still providing some of the nutrients to the plant instead of all the nutrients being leached out of the pot with just water-soluble fertilizers. And then on a monthly basis, it is recommended to apply 1 to 2 pounds of Epsom salt or magnesium sulfate to the fall garden mums. And this Epsom salt, as you can see here, will be dissolved in, say, a 5-gallon bucket and then sent through the irrigation as well. So it's important when you are applying magnesium sulfate or the Epsom salts is that you're not mixing them with some fertilizers because you can have some issues with it settling out. So it's best that you irrigate on a monthly basis just alone and not using the constant liquid feed of the fertilizer solution. So again, just the Epsom salt on its own.
And I know a lot of our hardware and stores and places, farm stores, they carry fertilize, but a lot of them probably don't carry the specific types. Is it suggested to probably order these early as well?
Yes, I would suggest ordering these earlier and to make sure that you can get them from your local greenhouse supplier in the state. Just put that order in earlier so then you have the nutrients that you need and that you're not using something that may cause nutritional challenges or problems later on throughout the production cycle. So when providing these nutrients, we want to talk about the amount of nutrients provided, the concentration. So once you get your rooted cuttings in from your supplier, you want to transplant them right into the containers, set them out in the field. At that point in time, we want to provide a lot of nutrients to the plant. So fall garden mums are heavy feeders, which means that we need to provide them with more nutrients. They just want to eat so much, for example. So the typical concentration of nitrogen that we need to apply to fall garden mums is about 300 parts per million nitrogen up until we start to see flower buds form. At that point in time, we need to back off on the nitrogen and reduce it down to, say, 150 to 200 parts per million nitrogen. And then at flower crack, about what we're seeing now, when we start to see the color of those buds, the flowers are opening, that we can even drop the concentration down even further to, say, 150 parts per million nitrogen, or it just stop providing fertilizer whatsoever.
Sounds like fertilizer can get a little bit complicated. Is there a schedule or something that I can follow just to keep me up to date what I should be applying each week or each day?
There are schedules that you can follow, and for the most part, they are available from the plant suppliers that you get them from. So, for example, Ball Horticulture, Syngenta, or Duman, they have cultural production guides, and within those guides, they typically provide schedules of when you should be providing that certain concentration of nitrogen to the plant and when to start backing down as well.
And with any system, we have to make sure that the fertilizer gets to the plant. So now we're going to talk about injectors.
Correct.
We have an injector system here. Dr. Owen, can you tell me a little bit more about this type of setup?
Sure. So injectors is what really helps deliver the nutrient solution to the plant from a stock solution to a diluted solution that will allow the plants to grow. So some considerations in terms of selecting an injector is that injector, is it going to be just a standard injector? So you cannot control the ratio of fertilizer solution being injected into the irrigation water, such as we have here, that we have just a standard irrigation fertilizer injector. I believe this is set at 1 to 100. So for every 1 gallon of stock solution coming from the stock tank, it is going to be injected to 100 gallons of irrigation water. Now, there are other fertilizer injectors that you can adjust the ratio, say that if you want 1 gallon for every 50 or 1 to 100 and so on, but those are typically a little bit more expensive. And I believe the Chemilizer, as we have here, is more readily available here in Kentucky. So that may be a good place to start with in terms of selecting a fertilizer injector. Furthermore, these injectors can also be used for not only fertilizer solutions, but also fungicides, sometimes pesticides, or even acid to acidify the irrigation water. So when setting up a irrigation system at the injector, is that we need to have a line coming from our irrigation water source, and that can be either from a pond, from a stream, well water, municipal water, rainwater. And then from that main irrigation line, we want to make sure that it's running to the injector, and then we have our siphon tube coming from our stock solution. And this siphon tube sucks up essentially the fertilizer stock solution and slowly injects it into the irrigation water, which will be exited out and then goes to the mom pad to be able to deliver to the moms. Essentially, that's what we're doing here.
With any system, you have to have water, but what kind of water quality are we looking at? I think that water's water, right?
Right, but there can be some issues with water quality, and that comes from the sources of water that you have. So for the first year, if you're ever growing fall garden moms, I would encourage not using pond or stream water, just because you're going to have to install some more filtration. It's just maybe not there yet in terms of the investment in the capital. So I would encourage to start with either well water or municipal water. So when we're talking about irrigation water quality, it really comes down to what nutrients are in there, but the most important is alkalinity. So what we really consider alkalinity is dissolved limestone in the irrigation water. So irrigation water alkalinity is important because that is the #1 driver that is going to cause pH drift over time within the substrate. So that will cause some nutritional problems over time, or drive that pH up. So then you have nutrient deficiencies such as high pH induced iron deficiency. So based off the water quality, you may have to acidify your irrigation water. And how do you determine that? You have to have an initial water quality analysis conducted, and then it's encouraged to have routine analysis throughout the production cycle to make sure that you are delivering the nutrients to the plant, but also to make sure that that irrigation water alkalinity is staying in check, that you're acidifying it and you're not tying up nutrients that should be available to the plants and they're showing deficiency symptoms. And in that regards, that will influence the marketability of your plants.
And I know I've had some other producers, they've used well water before, and the well itself, the water in it can change from rain to rain, so that can be more difficult. But looking at the different types of systems in the water, we do have tests through the University of Kentucky where we can test the water. Is that right?
That's correct. So not only would I encourage to submit initial water quality, but also, as I mentioned before, checking your water quality before it goes through the fertilizer injector. So you just want to have your clear water analyzed, like I mentioned, before you start growing and then throughout the growing season. And it may even be helpful to check your fertilizer solution to make sure that you are providing the nutrients to the plant that's needed. They also perform substrate or growing media analyses, so to help determine what your substrate pH is, what the electrical conductivity is, or in other regards, the water soluble salt. So how much nutrients are being delivered to the plants. So you just want to make sure those are in check and all the other nutrients are in check, so you're not experiencing any nutrient deficiencies or toxicities.
So if I have a big rainfall and it's kind of dreary and nasty for a week, when do I know when to turn on my fertilizer system? Because it's not only taking fertilizer, but it's taking water. Where is that happy medium at?
Yeah, so the challenge with outdoor fall garden moms is that when we have a large or heavy rain event, all of that irrigation water, which we provided the nutrients, that EC is being flushed out by the rainwater. So the plants are essentially going to be starving for a little bit. So before you start irrigating again, you really want to go around, walk your crop, check some of the pots, lift them up to see how heavy they are. You can go ahead and irrigate to provide those nutrients to the plants to deliver it. However, you may want to be on the area of caution because the substrate is going to be saturated and you don't want to have any disease problems or root rot problems from it being oversaturated. So just a couple days after irrigation event, maybe 1 or 2, just check it and see. But again, it really goes back to your substrate selection, that if you have a heavy peat, it's going to hold a lot of the water for the higher container capacity that it has. However, if you have a bark-based substrate, it's going to drain the water a little bit faster. So then you could probably go in and irrigate a little bit quicker than what you would typically would with a peat-based substrate.
We're coming to the end of our mum tour, and this is going to be our time for some tips. But I did have a quick question for Sarah, and she's got a great setup here. And it seems like the initial start of mums is just the setup. But how long does a system like this last, Sarah?
Well, it's really well worth the initial investment, and unlike vineyards or those types of things, you can start seeing results on your investment that very first year. These products have, in terms of the infrastructure, has lasted well into 5 years. There's been some minor replacements in terms of injectors or just the injector parts, but very, very worth the initial upfront cost.
And how long does a system like this last? About 5 years, or?
I think I have pushed it quite a bit further than 5 years, but 5 years would be a good number.
And with that, what's the first thing you have to replace? Is it just the matting, or do you have to replace everything?
The matting has been one of our issues, just because we've had some disease issues, and so I have thought that if I put some new matting down, that would help break that barrier, or make more of a barrier. Not necessarily true, but so the ground cover, certainly parts of it that we have replaced, and then just irrigation parts. Of course, there's always recurring costs such as your liners, your plugs, the fertilizer, but the basic infrastructure is really not that much.
Is there any other tips that you all would suggest for new growers?
Talk with other growers, but make sure that you establish contact with the extension office to get in touch with the experts. Sometimes we also learn by doing, and you're just keep really good notes about what works the first year so you don't repeat the mistakes the second year, and just stay on top of the industry news, especially the marketing trends.
Well, thank you all for joining us and being able to come on your farm today, Sarah. We really enjoyed being out here, and Dr. Owen sharing your knowledge with us. And now we'll be going into a time for questions. So if you have questions, feel free to ask.
So Dr. Owen is on with us, and he is with the University of Kentucky. He's the one that was on the video, and he is our new greenhouse specialist. And it looks like Dr. Nicole Gauthier is still on, if anybody has any questions. Also, I'll add, I didn't put this in there, but we do not endorse any products. We had a couple different products on and fertilizers and things, but we don't endorse any of those, any type of product.
Hi, Macy. I just want to go ahead and note that in the video, I had mentioned the Epsom salt drenches, that it could be 1 to 2 pounds, but I failed to mention the to how much parts per million, or the amount of water that you want to inject it at. So it's 1 to 2 pounds per 100 gallons of water that you need to be applying it. So again, you can put it through that injector after it's been dissolved if you have one set with a ratio of 1 to 100. So 1 or 2 pounds per 100 gallons of irrigation water for the Epsom salt application.
We do have a question here. It says, I missed what kind of soil. I got 87% peat moss and I missed the rest.
So there are 2 different types of substrates or growing medias that you can use for fall garden mum production. The first one is a peat-based substrate, so about 80% peat moss and 20% perlite. So that's a common peat-based substrate that you would typically see if you would go to a garden center, for example, or a big box store and looked at the plants that are growing out and available. So a peat-based substrate is going to be predominantly peat. They come in either compressed bales or bags. So the compressed bales are about 3.8 cubic feet. It is compressed so that you would have to expand it. So you would have to bust it up or to fluff it to be able to fill your containers. And then the other option is the loose filled bags. They're about 2.8 cubic feet. So you just have to put the pencil to paper and to see which one is best for you based on the economics. But there are other options depending on how many mums that you do want to grow. You can get large bulk bags of it loose filled. So that's about 13 cubic feet amount of substrate, or they'll do 1 yard, which is 27 cubic feet. So based off the amount of substrate you need, there are some conversions or calculators that will help you determine how much substrate you need based off of the container size that you have selected to grow your garden mums in. Now, the other type of substrate is what I previously mentioned is the bark-based substrate. So it's predominantly aged pine bark, and that will allow the irrigation or rainwater to drain a little bit more quickly compared to a peat-based substrate. So both of them are readily available, and I've seen it all in terms of for fall garden mum production.
Does anybody else have any more questions for Dr. Owen or Dr. Gauthier? I will let you all know we do have the videos, the 2 that we created. We have those on YouTube links, and I'll ask April. She'll send that out to you all later as well. You can go back and watch some of those videos if you would like.
If anybody's nervous about asking questions, get a hold of your agent and we will follow up back with you.
And if you all decide that you really want to grow mums, contact your local agent. Get us out there first. Make sure it's a good location. It's always, good to have your county agent out, and we can always bring Dr. Owen with us and just do a walkthrough and kind of where to start and how to get started and make sure we're on a good page.
All right, if we don't have any further questions, I know we're a little bit past 7, but barely. We appreciate all of our speakers this evening, and to Macy for all of her hard work on editing the videos. Both videos were very, very interesting and very good. So thank you all so much for that. Thank you all so much for participating. We will be back next Tuesday evening at 6 p.m. via Zoom. And the topic next week will be land management. So we hope we get to see all of your faces again next week. And if you have any questions in the meantime, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We are here to help and assist. So thank you all. And any other closing remarks from the agents or from anybody? All right. Well, thank you all so much. Stay safe this week and enjoy the weather. Take care.